To the first four-state dairy nutrition and management conference webinar. This is an extension of the management conference we had earlier this month, and we are excited to have Dr. Mike Hutjens going over the reason high solids milk is more profitable than low solids, and he will be interviewing our winner of the 7 pounds award program we started there at the conference, Kevin Steinway, the winner of that 7 pound. Dr. Hutjens, Professor Emeritus with the University of Illinois, and is truly recognized as leading the charge for producers to be aware of the importance of high solids milk to their milk stream. Mike, as I always say, the podium is yours.
Well, very good, Fred. And first, my thanks to Fred and Jim Sulphur as well. I know he's online, and the Four State Group for the invitation opportunity to present what I think is kind of an exciting topic here. Another way, another useful tool to measure profitability on a dairy farm. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go through this program rather briskly. And if you have questions, you can send those in on the chat room, and we'll deal with those at the end of the total webinar as well. So we are moving forward, and why is this topic important? Well, as most of you listeners know, certainly all of you that are here in the Midwest, you know you are paid for not pounds of milk, but pounds of milk fat, pounds of milk protein, and of course, pounds of other solids. You'll see those prices pop up here in just a few minutes as well. We also know that milk components are impacted by genetics. You can select for milk components by the feeding program and even management on the farm, such as crowding and those kinds of aspects as well. We know that important concepts that milk component yield is driven both by the pounds of milk and the components contained in that milk. Remember that. It's an important concept that we look at both aspects of them, because you can improve your amount of components sold on those areas. And then finally, a useful tool, milk components become a reflection of herd health. And so in terms of milk fat, milk protein, rumen dynamics, body weight loss, and energy dynamics in the dairy herd. Let's take a quick look and see what these components are. In fact, in the next day or two, these will change again. This is the May pay period. This is a federal number. So milk fat of $2.66 a pound. In red is for kilograms for some of you that may be a bit more comfortable with the metric system. Milk protein, $2.48. And that one is really tightened up in the last several months as far as that goes. There used to be an 80-cent spread there. Protein was lower. And yet I will argue that in the future, that's what's going to really be a driver for dairy products, is going to be milk protein, because consumers want animal protein in their diets, beef, pork, turkey, poultry, and dairy products as well. Other solids, that'll be primarily your lactose and minerals, 32 cents a pound. And you can see it also contributes to the total cost or value of your milk being shipped. Now, the question is, what are we going to do with all these products here? You realize we're exporting 16 or 18% of our milk. So it means one of every 6 semis that leave farms has to go all across the oceans someplace, or across the borders to Mexico or Canada. And here are some relative figures that just came out. You can see this is the April first week of May. In the U.S., the cheese was valued at $1.72, and it's in red because it says we are the cheapest source of cheese in the world. The major exporting companies, the EU, European Union, $2.42. In New Zealand, obviously the Oceanic Group, $2.23. So we can move this product, and we're very competitive. And if you've been watching the news lately, the dollar is devalued, which makes it even a better buy, because it means relative to other currencies, we are a cheaper purchase in the export business. Look at butter. I'm not going to read those numbers to you. All these will be available to you if you want to download them. You can see butter, also a very good buy. And powder is pretty much a push. There's not a big difference there on milk powder at this stage of the game. So that's the good news. We should be able to export, at least currently, with our current economic situations, to those countries, depending, of course, on what effects tariffs might have here in the future. take a look and see what is in 2024. This was reported in the April issue of Hord's Dairyman. Milk fat in the nation was 4.23%, true protein 3.29. And it's amazing. You'll see how they breeds different here in just a few minutes as well. Another way to look at that, if you're a cheesemaker, and that is that in 2010, 100 pounds of milk would give you a 10.1 pounds of cheese. Now in 2024, 11.4 pounds of cheese. So obviously that is much more valuable to them in terms of producing cheese as well. Also in the that same issue of Hord's Dairyman, Chad Chow from Penn State showed how the increase we had in over the last 5 years in terms of pounds of fat and pounds of protein. You can see very nice increases there. And then you can see some small changes in the genetic increase in terms of percent fat and percent protein. So you can see, again, milk yield becomes a big factor equally as well. So let's look at each of these components separately if we can in the next 20 minutes. First of all, let's talk about milk yield. Milk yield is important because you realize that peak milk sets the lactation curve. There's just all kinds of data showing you that if you can set peaks higher, you'll end up getting more milk in that lactation curve. We're going to give you some new numbers that you can write down here in just a minute. We also know that we have to get dry matter intake into these cows to maintain both the milk yield and milk components. In fact, if energy becomes limiting, you'll start seeing milk components dropping along with milk yield as well. To me, feed efficiency is a tremendous tool. Every dairy farmer here in the United States and in the world basically should have that, and that is the relationship of pounds of milk adjusted to either 3.5 or energy-corrected milk per pound of dry matter consumed. And that number should be somewhere over 1.6. Some of the very high-producing herds will be up around 1.8 as far as that goes as well. We do know that body condition score can be a plus for milk yield because it serves as a resource of energy in early lactation, but also can be a negative because it can impact a metabolic disorder such as ketosis and NEFAs as well in the program. So again, that body condition score can be a plus or minus for milk yield. And we know that transition management is a really key factor in terms of setting that lactation curve and holding that lactation as well. This is a very busy slide, but one of the more useful ones we'll have. I want you to be aware of the date, though. This data was collected in 2017 from North Carolina Processing Center. So many of you are in this chart here, and what you have here is basically 3 lactations. You have first, second, and third plus lactation cows. Then you can see 4 different levels of milk production. And basically 26,000 would be very close to the national average right now at this point. So there's 4 different levels of milk production there. So 30,000 was the highest level back, and that's in 2017. We're going to go back and try to get this redone this coming year as well to get the newest data here, because these numbers obviously will have changed as well. Then you can look across and you can see different days in milk. So you can see early lactation cows, you might say coming out of the fresh cow pen. Then you can see early, mid, and late lactation cows listed as well. So the key is, does your numbers match up with this database? And you'll see at the bottom, there's thousands of herds. So this is on-farm data. Now take a look at that in the red column. That is that ratio of milk to peak milk. And you can see that for first lactation heifers, that number is almost 300. Remember the old thumb rule, 200 pounds or 225 pounds if you're using DHIA data as well. And now you can see for first lactation cows, that's almost 300 pounds. So obviously you can see that if we put 98 pounds of peak milk times 309, bingo, there you have it. And then the second lactation, that number is about 2.25. And then here's the old thumb rule on the third lactation cows, that ratio is right around 200. So again, useful numbers to look at on your herds to see, first, are you getting the right peak on your cows? Remember, every cow is going to peak on the herd. The question is it the true peak for those cows? And then, of course, the question is, how well do these cows persist as he moves through the lactation as well? What a powerful tool to have. Okay, that's milk production. Give you some guidelines there. Let's say a quick word about milk fat. Milk fat, of course, is the most valuable product right now of the 3 components listed. The sources you can see by and large are going to be about 50% coming from rumen volatile fatty acids, and they result in the shorter chain fatty acids. And the other half comes from what we call blood lipids. These are fatty acids that the cows either are mobilizing from their body resources, or they're consuming from roasted soybeans or fuzzy cottonseed. And there might be a small amount of synthesis going on as well from the liver and rumen microbes as well. So those are your major sources. What's exciting about that is that you can actually see and analyze butterfat in your herd to see how they fit. And so again, the word on the left there, this is a Cornell slide that says de novo. That's a synthesize. In other words, the mammary gland literally takes acetate and butyrate, hooks those dudes together, and starts forming these C12, C16 fatty acids. The number, first number indicates the number of carbon units in that fatty acid. The last number after the colon is if it's have any double bonds or saturation. And so you can see we have de novo, we have preformed. And those are very cleanly defined here, and in it in terms of that's coming primarily from dietary sources and from the animal mobilization of stored lipid material as well. What gets a bit challenging is what we call mixed, and they overlap. And so interpreting it can be a bit more challenging. But at the recent conference, Heather Dan from the Minard Institute summarized some data and suggested that de novo synthesis should be somewhere around 25 or 30% of the total fatty acids in that sample or from your bulk tank. And I understand now DFA is providing that service to dairy farmers to analyze bulk tank fatty acids to see, are you in that? So if that number got below 25%, you have to ask, we aren't getting enough VFAs coming from the rumen to get that job done. And then, of course, you can see the preformed, somewhere is 40 to 45. So if you're feeding palm fatty acids, if you're feeding extruded or heat-treated oleic soybeans, that number should be approaching that 45 number. So again, nice diagnostic tool. And if your co-op or your processor provides this data to you, you can look at changes and trends to see what's going on in the dairy herd. What a powerful tool to have. Now, let's say a quick word, because this was a topic at the four-state conference, the high oleic soybeans out there. And we know they're on the marketplace at this point. Certainly the big difference there is that it has a different type of fatty acid, and it's very rumen friendly. It's called oleic fatty acid. That is a C18 with one double bond. And you can see that it in this new hybrid of these soybeans, 75% oleic and only 7% linoleic. Why that's important? Linoleic is what's going to cause challenges in the rumen and potentially have impacts on fiber digestibility and lower butterfat tests. And you can see this is a really flip-flop. We literally flipped for more oleic acid in the program. Oleic acid also improves digestibility of fatty acids. So that's kind of a double-edged sword or double-edged advantage there as well. You can feed very high levels. More about that in just a few minutes here. At this point, the good news is there is no higher cost and seed cost, and then no yield reductions. And those are the two major companies that are providing these products. And these are both GMOs. However, the University of Missouri has come out with a variety, and it's available commercially that is a non-GMO. So those farmers that are organic farmers or wanting to that type of soybean, they can purchase that equally as well. We do recommend roasting the soybeans for two reasons. It will increase the amount of rumen undegraded protein, and that therefore yields a little bit more lysine. And of course, because of the on-farm growing of soybeans, you don't have to purchase the RUP sources or have some rumen protected lysine in the program. So certainly an exciting topic. So here are some research that was presented at the four-state conference. In summary, the optimal level seems to be around 8 to 15% of the ration dry matter. That'll be somewhere about 4 to 6 pounds of high oleic soybeans there. The level should determine how much fat you need in the diet and what the energy status of your diet will be. They also did some work by adding sodium acetate. That is the acetate that is produced by the rumen microbes. They externally added this to the feeding program, and that resulted in higher milk yield as well. Penn State has very similar research as well. They also looked at palmitic acid fed, and they saw a nice increase with palmitic acid being added to high oil beans. So it was an additive effect and got 5 more pounds more milk compared to in that study. And the increased income over feed cost was anywhere from $1 to $1.40 per cow per day compared to controlled diets. A lot of that depends a little bit on if you're raising them or if you're buying them and taking them in to be commercially processed. This just shows you a quick snapshot, a very, very busy slide, but there you can see in yellow, there are those same comparisons we showed you a bit earlier. I put this on because you might just to drive home the point, take a look at the corn silage, corn grain, and you got all kinds of C18-2. So you are feeding lots of that conjugated linoleic acid in the feeding program. We have corn silage for the cottonseed. If you get any soy oil coming in, it's a player as well. So certainly these high oleic beans are going to give us a bit more of a break in the feeding program. Our guideline is that once you start reaching 500 grams of total C18-2 or linoleic acid, then you might want to be cautious of monitoring such things as butterfat tests and effects in rumen dynamics as well. So you can just want to drive home the point that the soybeans are also, conventional soybeans are very high in C18-2. And this simply shows what's happening here. When you feed these soybeans to cows, if it happens to be the conventional soybean or corn silage, you've got linoleic acid. And the bad news is in the blue line, if it goes over there, it changes the pathway. And now you produce something called a trans-10 cis-12 trans-10 fatty acid. And that is what can really drop butterfat tests as much as 0.4 to 0.5 point based on some Cornell research. And that inhibits the last step. Ideally, if you don't get too much PUFAs in the feeding program, the rumen will handle that and we'll go down the green arrow route and makes it much more rumen friendly at that stage of the program. So we might ask, well, one of the common questions at our meetings this last winter has been, why are these Holstein cows producing so much butterfat? And the answer is that some of it's going to be genetics, and we'll see what Kevin has to say on his aspect there in terms of which routes he's going there. Genetics can be a factor. Our geneticists, both at Penn State and here at Illinois, said make sure if you are selecting for milk components, you select for pounds of fat and pounds of protein or cheese yield, something like that. Because if you select a milk volume, the researchers would suggest that you are selecting against the percentage fat and percent protein as well. We are seeing here in the U.S. some shifting to more jerseys and crossbreedings as well. We're seeing perhaps an increase of 3 to 4% now from in the breed from used to be around 8 or 7% jerseys to 11 or 12%. High quality forages are a winner because high forage qualities increase acetate production and dry matter intake, improve rumen efficiency, stabilizing the rumen pH. It really accentuates fiber digesting bacteria. And of course, many of us are feeding on farms supplemental sources of fat in the feeding program. Now, this is my idea. This is a new research study I just started here at the Illinois crossbreeding program. You can see that the front half of the cow is Holstein, so she eats like a Holstein, but the back half is a Jersey, and therefore she produces very high component milk at that. So some of you are interested, just send me an email and I'll give you the details on how you can become a winner on this. It's almost like Shark Tank to see if you want to be a member of the Shark Tank group. Okay, that's enough humor. Let's go to the third component as our time is rapidly getting away from us here and say a quick word about milk protein. And as I said earlier, I think this is where the future is going to be. So don't downplay milk protein. And so some of you guys that really, gals would like yogurt, bingo, here we are. That's going to be a very valuable dairy product here in the future as well. Sources of milk protein, about 2/3 of it is going to come from rumen amino acids. And notice the word fermentable carbohydrates. And some of you will scratch your head and say, Hutjens, we're talking about protein here. Well, really, we're talking about amino acids is what we're talking about here. And so if you really want to grow rumen microbial amino acids, which are extremely balanced for the amino acid profile for both not only growth, but also for milk protein synthesis, it's ideal. And so in red there, those are kind of our guidelines we are suggesting as far as the fermentable carbohydrates, because I want that rumen to really grow amino acids for me. And, oh, by the way, produce volatile fatty acids, which of course are going to be a precursor for milk fat we just talked about a bit earlier. And then of course, once the rumen maxes out, and that's probably going to be somewhere around 70 pounds, 60 or 70 pounds of milk. Then you're going to have to look at some of these additional RUP sources, and then you'll look at the level of protein, the type of RUP you're bringing into the program, and then the quality of that as well in the program. So those are your two sources, and certainly in a well-balanced diet, you will grow almost 2/3 to 3/4 of the amino acids. And by the way, listeners, your dairy cow does not have a crude protein requirement. She doesn't have a metabolizable protein requirement. She has an amino acid requirement. And so you're going to see more and more of that research coming in the future here, looking at the total amino acid profile in the feeding program. Here's just one study from The Ohio State University, simply showing one of their studies in which it's labeled LP, stands for low protein, came out of another group of studies they did there, and then LP with amino acid balance. And they balance that by using an animal source of protein along with rumen-protected lysine and methionine. And you can see that at the same level of crude protein here, it's basically 17%. When you got the amino acids right, we got ourselves about 8 pounds more milk. The protein test came up 1/10 of a point. And sometimes when you add amino acid, you'll see a 2/10 increase in milk protein. And of course, the good news is the MUNs actually went down, which meant your cow was more efficiently converting those nitrogen sources into usable sources for the dairy cow for various functions. Dr. Jimmy Clark, some of you will recognize that name, basically said if you're going to feed rumen-protected amino acids, and I'm not sure if you are doing that or not, we'll ask you that question if you don't volunteer that. Certainly, Dr. Clark would indicate one of three things can happen. One, we can see an increase in milk protein, and that can be as much as 2 or 3/10 of a unit. 1/10 is fairly common, and that usually occurs very quickly because you're putting the amino acid directly into the bloodstream, and therefore the mammary gland, if she's in the correct stage of lactation, she will respond by picking that up and make that into milk protein as well. Another choice could be an increase in milk yield, and we saw that in the Ohio State study. In fact, both things happened in the Ohio State study. We saw 8 pounds more milk and 1/10 of a point increase in milk protein there. That usually occurs primarily in early lactation cows, indicating, again, a strategy of using rumen-protected amino acids. And then you might see an increase in butterfat test, and that could be related to, especially if you're feeding rumen-protected methionine. And all of you know that methionine, besides being an amino acid, it does a lot of other things. It's a source of methyl donors in the diet. It also reduces stress on cattle, dairy cows, so it can be another factor as well. Hutjens Dairyman does a market survey each year. This is their most current market survey here. And one thing they ask is how much are you feeding? What are your sources of rumen-protected methionine? And there they are. So you can see there are lots of different sources of rumen-protected amino acids. I think you will ask 3 questions when you look at your product. 1, what is the level of methionine in that product that I'm purchasing? Number 2, how much of it bypasses the rumen? Typically 80 to 90%. And then thirdly, how much of it is available in the small intestine to be absorbed? And that typically will be out of that 7% level as well. So ask those questions when you look at these products here as well, because what you're looking for is metabolizable methionine. That's kind of the magic word, metabolizable methionine, not total, not different forms, but what does it get there? And that's going to be somewhere in that 2 cents per gram range. Typical numbers you'll see on adding methionine, it would be in that 9 to 10 to 15 gram level. The same survey from Hutjens Dairyman, and some of you may have been a part of these surveys, they asked that same thing on lysine. Again, you can see about 15% of the herds indicate that they are feeding that in 2024. Those are the 4 major players. I think there may be another 2 new ones that have come on board as well. And again, the same type of question to ask, that 3-part question that we asked just a bit earlier there as well. So what about balancing for amino acids and evaluating that? Number 1, you just have to have a rumen model. A rumen model predicts the amount of microbial protein that is going to be synthesized based on the dietary numbers we saw just a bit earlier there. Another number you will find is that is a ratio of lysine to methionine, and that is coming on the NASEM program. That is the new dairy NRC, somewhere around 2.7 to 1. That is the optimal ratio. My argument is if you've got the right level, the right grams of metabolizable protein, then you'll have the right ratio, and then you'll have to find that sweet spot. So in other words, every herd, I'm not quite sure exactly what that number is, but you'll work with that as well. According to that survey, I found this number a bit surprisingly high, but 41% of the farmers indicating that they were balancing for amino acids, not buying them, but balancing. They have a Loon model out there. A lot of feed companies provide that service as well. I use a cut point that says if you got cows that are producing over 2.4 pounds of true protein, then you probably should be certainly looking at amino acid balancing, because you want to shortchange these cows here, and especially if your milk protein test is low compared to the national average. Well, Fred, we got to start wrapping up here. Let's look at some field interpretations very quickly. Hang on to your hats. We're going to pick up a little speed here. Number one, here are your breed averages. So you can take a look and ask. That's one of the first questions. Are your Holsteins, are your Jerseys, are your Brown Swiss, are they above the breed average? Interesting, over the last 5 years, Holsteins have increased 1/10 of a point every year. So you Holstein breeders, farmers are certainly very attuned to what's going on here in the program. And you can look at this number, then Curran will have his numbers here in just a few minutes as well. Jerseys have also increased 1/10 of a point this last year. That's the first year I saw a significant increase in the Jersey breed. The other three breeds have not moved on either of the components as far as that goes as well. Notice over there on the third column over, I like that one. Simply, you get that is the ratio of milk fat and milk protein. If you divide 4.11 into 3.17, that's 77%. And I know our winners were much closer to about 72% here. They're simply meaning that they are having higher fat levels relative to the protein that's being produced by these cows as well. Here's that same slide that we saw a bit earlier, but now this is milk components. And again, I don't have to walk you through it, but every time you see a red number, it means that butterfat test or the milk protein was below the national average in 2017. And the thing that really catches my eye, and you can see in the first 100 days that basically all cows, all levels of production, all stages or lactation numbers are in below 3. And so that would be, there's an opportunity. We call that an opportunity slide there as well. You see in butterfat, the high producing herds do a very nice job in early lactation. Part of that is probably due to fat mobilization coming off the adipose tissue. But then you can see in the 40 to 100 days, the numbers turn red, which means probably reflecting dry matter intake. No more fat mobilization are going to occur here, and butterfat test kind of traces down, and you'll see there's a trend that the better herds do a better job in terms of getting closer to that level. Certainly, we look at another thing. If you're on DHI, since you have nothing else to do, if it's raining now in Illinois today, we can look at what we call milk fat inversions. That is, take your red pen, circle every cow on your DHI sheet in which the milk fat test is 0.2 of a point below the true protein. So in other words, that would be cows that were having a 3.2 milk protein test, and they were below 3 fat. Then I call milk fat depression. Take a blue pen or a different pen and maybe be circling the same cow twice, and that is where that cow is 1 whole fat percentage below the herd average. So if your herd average is 4%, then every cow below 3, I would circle with milk fat depression. Here, as we wrap up, this is another one that might tie in nicely, Fred, with today's theme, and that is milk component efficiency. And that simply means that if you take and divide the dry matter into the pounds of milk fat, that will give you an efficiency of components. And you can see in the first example, that would be a very good number. 13% is a very good number. You'll see in the bottom row down there, 60 pounds of dry matter, 60 pounds of milk solids, that's 10%. Well, that'd be a very low efficiency based on milk components. And then the last thing we'll talk about, and that is protein efficiency. And I think we'll see more of this in the future as far as that goes. Here's an example. I used a herd that's giving 90 pounds of milk with a 3.2 butterfat, 3.2 milk protein test that gives me 2.88 pounds of milk protein. And so remember that 2.88 pounds of protein. If I'm getting 55 pounds of dry matter at 17% protein, I get a protein efficiency of 30%. However, if I take that same level of production, but not only have a 16% diet, and that's where a lot of my farmers are going to be at here, that's about a 33% protein efficiency. You can see if we get down to a very low number, like 14%, and yes, Cornell has got research showing that you can get a well-balanced diet, high corn silage, different sources of protein, room-protected amino acids, you can get a 38% efficiency out of that. So that's another useful tool that you might want to use on your farm. So Fred, my time is gone. I'm 2 minutes late, actually. Take-home messages, milk components are going to be important in the future as far as that goes. And I think milk protein is going to have will continue to be a very valuable component of that. Look at your records to see if there's opportunities on the farm, and then use the tools that you have in your farm. Your breed average versus your herd, the ratio of milk fat to milk protein we talked about, feed efficiency and mun values, all these things would work well. So with that, Fred, I'm going to take an escape out of my program here, and I need to close this down and hopefully stop sharing my screen and turn the program back to you, Fred. Thank you very much.
Very good. While I'm making the introduction, Kevin, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we'll be ready to go.
Oh,
yep. Kevin and his crew at Hyde Park Farms in Minnesota milked 760 cows. They average 109 pounds of milk per cow with a 4.49% fat and a 3.3% protein. That pencils out to 8.51 pounds of solids. A lot of people ask there at their convention about energy corrected milk. This herd averaged 124.92 pounds per cow of energy corrected milk. So we're excited to have Kevin here and give us some insight on how he got to that 8.5 spot with his herd of calves. Kevin, the podium is yours.
well, thank you for inviting me to be here today. It is an honor. But first, we'd like to recognize that we know there's herds that do better than us, and so we're always trying to learn from each other. So today, we'd just like to share with what we do and look forward to questions and how we can also improve. So Hyde Park Holsteins was started in 1970 by my father. I got to make sure I can advance these. I can't get my screen to advance.
Yeah, you'll have to click on it maybe, or it might be tricky or use your.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. So thank you. So the farm was started in 1970 by my dad, Kerwin, who was left a teaching job at the University of Illinois. His dad called him and said, if you want to come home and farm, come home, or otherwise I'm going to sell the cows. So he left teaching and came home in 1970. The original dairy was purchased in 1943 by my grandfather. We milk 680 Holsteins 3 times a day. We raise all of our heifers on site, and then we also finish all of the steers. This is a picture of my family, my wife Kay on the left and myself, Andrea, Justin's wife, and their son Gavin. Justin is a partner in the dairy. He works for Egg Hedge Desk in the Minneapolis with dairy risk management. Then I have Lee in the back in the gray sweater. He is doing an internship. He's going to be a junior at the University of Minnesota this year. He's working in marketing and egg business management. Next to him in the blue shirt is my son Jake. He's a partner in the dairy, and he's also works with Valley Egg Software, doing Power Boss installs, traveling kind of the world doing that. And then in the bottom right corner is Blake. He's going to be a senior in high school this year, and he's very involved in the dairy, helping make a lot of decisions on the farm for breeding and genetics. He likes to breed cows, and he's just getting back from Europe from a dairy judging experience overseas. There team members that make this farm work, and it's really about people and consistency. Obviously, Kerwin is in the top left corner is my dad. He started the farm, or when he came back, Then Eric is the herdsman. Eric, Dan, and Nick are all brothers, and they had a dairy farm within 4 miles of the dairy. In 2003, their dad sold the cows, and as time went on, the boys have all come and helped us, and they're very integral in making this farm work. Eric's the herdsman. The bottom left is Nick. He takes care of feeding and chopping and running a lot of equipment. His brother Dan in the middle. He kind of keeps the brothers in line, and then on the bottom right is their cousin Cameron. He takes care of morning milkings. He used for 17 years and now he's transitioned out of that and takes care of a lot of the herd health stuff and vaccinating and moving heifers. Real key component of making all this work is Ben Pfluger and Dr. Dave Atwell. Dr. Dave Atwell is with Adiseo. He worked for Egg Partners for a while and was our nutritionist and got us convinced to do a lot of things to get us to where we are today. And then we're very fortunate to have Ben Pfluger through Egg Partners work with us on the current nutrition. Both of them have been very integral in getting the production and components that we have gotten. We raise all of our own crops on about 2,100 acres. We have 1,400 acres of corn and the rest of it's alfalfa. The low lignin is probably one of the things that we've stuck with on the alfalfa. We use the Harvextra alfalfa on all the acres. We cut between 22 and 24 days. And then we do feed barley silage to the dry cows and heifers. On the corn silage, we always select for high yielding, high starch varieties. We've never done the BMR just because of the yield drag and the inconsistency. We really like to try to find consistency in everything that we do. And that goes with chopping. It's kind of like a race. We have 2 cutters, 2 mergers, and 1 chopper, and we have neighbors with choppers if something would break, because we try to get it done as fast as we can to get the best quality feed that we can. The statistics, like they said, from the contests at the 4th State Nutrition Conference, 109 pounds of milk per cow per day last year with a 4.49 test, 3.3 protein for 8.51 pounds of fat and solids or fat and protein combined, 126.8 energy corrected milk. And I think the goal is that this kind of drives the employees and everybody that they always want to continue to do better. And that's our goal, is to always do the best that we can every day. And I think education is an important part of that. When you look at the staff, there's over 26 years of college experience and training on the people at the farm. And I think that helps make people look at things differently and see how we can always do something better or how we can improve. Many of the employees have been at the farm for more than 20 years and they're family, and it's really, we're fortunate to have probably 2 families or 3 families that all work together and they kind of keep everybody else in line, which makes my job very easy. Egg Partners has been a local co-op that's been a partner of ours for many years. And we can always trust that they're going to provide us with the best possible feed quality that they can. We also encourage employees to attend educational seminars, go on farm tours to see how other people do things, to see if we can bring things home to do better at our place. Genetic side, we select for high net merit animals with high components. We've done that when Kerwin was in the old barn, milking 60 cows in the tie-stall barn. We select for pounds of fat, protein, and also milk. Our goal is to have over 200 pounds of fat and protein combined. And you can look at the slides and the ciders that we've used for fat and protein, and then the genetic averages. Just always trying to get better and always breed the best to the best. And that's kind of what's it's fun to watch my son Blake. He looks at bull proofs and he's picking out bulls and he thinks grandpa picks the bull he shouldn't have. He'll let him know. And they kind of go back and forth. So it's fun to see. And then Eric kind of oversees them both and he takes care of all the breeding. So in the end, Eric gets to say what gets used. I think the factors that have contributed to our success over the years is feed quality. Back in 1995, when we first built the first freestall barn, you just go and scoop off the feed pile. There wasn't face shavers. And then we tried those clam buckets, and, we ended up hauling a lot of feed away. That wasn't very good. And as face shavers come along and we realize that, piles keep better feed than bunkers, we've gotten to do some of those things. Everything is covered with 2 layers of plastic. Every crop has its own spot, so no feed piles get overlaid by another feed pile. And then the nice thing is having your own equipment to make feed when you want, the quality that you want. For instance, last week we made second crop hay. We cut on Tuesday and it was humid. Well, we thought we should be able to chop on Wednesday. We tried it. It was 68%, so we waited until the next day. Tried it again, it was only 65. So, having the ability to wait till the hay is dry enough to chop is a big plus, and not just going because you have to, because the custom harvester is there. The big thing on the facilities that have contributed to success is in 2009, we switched from mattresses to sand bedding. And within 12 months, we were up to 100 pounds per cow. And then really we haven't dropped below that since then. But it was a lot of work to switch. We dug all the mattresses and the tires up, car tires that were ground up underneath the stalls, dug all that out. We had to cut all the cement out with a saw and beat it out with a hammer. It was a lot of work, but it was definitely worth it over the years. We tried to reduce overcrowding. We have in the bottom right corner, there's a slide, is our pre-fresh facility. We have a bedding pack, and then we added onto that to put in some stalls to keep that not as crowded. And then we also try to implement new technologies when we can. We use DeLaval activity collars. We have fans and soakers. And then we also have a lime bedding for heifers to keep them as clean and comfortable as we can. And talking about heifers, in 2015, we built this heifer facility. It's just stalls under the roof and then outside feeding. And we had a lot of corkscrew problems. So that was there was headlocks on this picture. We took out the headlocks and put in the rail feeding. And then they were eating off the ground. We put in the bunks so they wouldn't have to reach. And that was really instrumental in getting better quality feed. But then it wasn't enough. So then we ended up building another bedding pack barn to keep the heifers out of the free stalls till they're at least 9 months of age. The big nutritional benefit for us was working with Adiseo and Smartamine and Dr. Dave Atwell. We started feeding Smartamine in 2007, and we saw immediate response in components. And then from there, we've just grown from that. I think the biggest thing is we always try to use ingredients that can't vary very much. So we don't do high moisture corn. We don't do wet gluten feeds. We don't do a lot of things that have variation, because consistency is important. Even, in cottonseed, even when cotton got expensive, we kept feeding it because it maybe at the time wasn't financially made sense, but for the cows it did, and it was consistent. And why have we stayed with amino acids? Because the component yields have paid, it's proven that it's paid. And then the research has shown that, it's better for reproduction health, cow health, and transition cow health. And I think in Dr. Hutjens' talk, peaks are important, and you have to get as high a peaks as you possibly can. And you don't want to make a change just because milk prices are going to be low to miss out on and getting higher peaks. For high park Holsteins for the long term, we always want to increase components, improve reproduction, and decrease mastitis. So this is kind of a graph of the genetic progress on protein from 2012 to 2024. In 2012, we're at 3.15. In 2024, we're at 3.3. On fat, we went from 3.8 to 4.49. And egg rates, you can see that they've improved from 2013 at 21% up to about over 30% now. And cell count has gone down. That's one thing that we've never had a low cell count, for years and years and years. And so it's kind of fun to see that we're consistently under 100,000 now. But I think for the success for our farm is really great people. It's all about people, family, employees, the people we work with, good suppliers. Always selecting the best bulls to breed, making high quality feed, and having fun making high quality feed, and then designing cows for the facilities. And one of the things is we don't overcrowd. 15% is the most we'll overcrowd, and then implementing new technologies when we can. In the future, we'd like to expand some more facilities, investigating in this highlight soybeans, and kind of planning for the next generation. As the boys come back, we need to figure out the next expansion project, and that's what we're looking at for the future. So with that, I don't have any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. If people have questions and want to go ahead and put that in the chat box, we'll make sure that Kevin has an opportunity to answer them. Mike, what do you have?
Well, I have a question for Kevin, and that is, I'm curious. You have a very high butterfat test. You're feeding. Sounds like you're feeding fuzzy cottonseed. Do you know about how many pounds of that you're feeding, and are you using any of the other fat added products like the palm oils or those kinds of products?
Yeah, we're feeding 5 pounds of cotton, and then we do feed a lot of the palm fats.
Do you know how many pounds of the palm are you feeding? Like a pound per cow per day? Any idea how much the palm fat you're putting in?
It's all in the grain mix, so I leave that up to Ben, but we're at about 5.5 to 6% fat in the diet.
Okay, very good. Have you looked, Kevin, with the lysine? Have you considered looking at adding lysine to the mix as well, rumen protected lysine, or are you using blood meal? Do you know what anything about that?
Yeah, we're using blood meal and some lysine.
Okay,
and that's the same thing with blood meal. Even the price varies. We leave it in just because we need the lysine.
very good, very good.
Kevin, have you, you mentioned you try to stay at 15% of overcrowding. Have you tried going higher, and what were the results?
Well, that was part of the reason I entered into this, let them enter this contest, because I got heifers to sell or cows to sell. So I thought if it'd be if I could do well in this, maybe somebody want to buy some cows. So, we don't really go over. We just kind of set it at 680. That's 15%. We'll get up to 700, and now we got to sell cows again. That's last weekend. It was over 100-degree heat index, and if you're overcrowded too much, you just lose too much milk. And so they've come back to where they were after that short heat spell. So no, the more we tend to overcrowd at this production level, they do drop more.
Kevin,
Did my
Kevin,
question pop into the chat?
I have not seen any, Jim.
Oh, my question is, what's your key, Kevin, to keep employees that long? I mean, that's, always a struggle on farms, but it seems like you've had pretty good luck.
I think treat them like family, treat them how you'd want to be treated yourself. And I think that was, when I worked for Pharma Industries and sold feed, that was one of the things. I got to tour a lot of farms and see how people treat people. And, when you go somewhere, would you want to work on that farm? Or, how would you like? And I think that's one of the things that I always try to do is treat people like I would like to be treated.
Kevin, I was going to ask you a question, if you don't mind, on the you obviously are doing some crossbreeding. You're feeding out beef cattle. I assume those are crossbreds. Or are you not doing any crossbreeding at this point? Are they all Holsteins? And why are you feeding them out? Do you think you can make more money feeding them out than selling them?
So it's all conventional. We don't do any crossbreeding. And I think the industry says we should be crossbreeding, breeding to beef. And we've avoided that because it's good to have enough heifers on hand. So you never can plan for enough heifers. And so we've just stayed conventional. And then the Holstein steers we feed out, we fatten them out to 1,500 to 1,600 pounds and sell them.
You may be very fortunate because you're in the right spot right now because heifers are extremely valuable right now. Are you trying? Are you getting some sold? And I'm guessing they're over $3,000.
Yeah, what we've been doing is we freshen them and then get them going, and then we'll pick out cows, and try to sell groups of 2 and 3 year old cows that are averaging 100 to 120 pounds a day, and then we'll sell them.
So I find that interesting. You see the advantage that way you get the calf obviously as well, and then it also takes out some of the guesswork. So if I'm going to buy an animal, you pretty much proven to me that she's a solid animal. So wow, that's an interesting approach. Have you ever thought of just selling the pregnant heifer, or you just don't do that?
No, we don't do that because I like the calf. I like to have the calf to continue on to be able to have the numbers, and then also I like to make sure it's a good animal for the next producer. So this way we can, we don't want to sell something that's not going to be good.
You had mentioned,
Kevin, I think there's more of an interest in that. Have you had pretty good luck selling those wet cows? Because I know there's a few farms. I get probably half a dozen questions last year about people, and now maybe with heifer prices high, this is going to change. But they don't want to raise a heifer. They want to breed everything to beef and buy wet cows because they just don't have the facilities to raise them. They just don't want to raise calves.
So my thought, when my boys come back, they think that I'm crazy that they wanted to start breeding to beef. So we do have 6 beef calves that we bred some to beef, but it's more valuable for us to have that Holstein calf that we can raise, and then we know how it was raised. We know that the disease, if it got pneumonia, then we can sell it before we even breed it. And then I think there's a market for those fresh cows because people want to know what they're going to get. And if you're buying pregnant heifers, it's kind of a hit and miss. But if you can buy a cow that as a 2-year-old that's milking 90 to 110 pounds a day, there's more value there than just buying a pregnant heifer.
Well, the other thing I like about them, Kevin, is they have a clean uterus and they have a good udder. I think that's worth something.
Oh, definitely, because if you're buying a spring and heifer, you don't know if it's going to be lopsided, 3/4, and then cell count too. Maybe they're going to freshen with mastitis. Well, that's the worst thing if you spent $3,000 to $3,500 on a heifer, and then you get stuck with that. And if you're breeding your own herd to beef, well, now you got $1,000 to $1,500 to offset the purchase of that animal. So then it doesn't make that purchase of $3,500 that much. You're only paying $2,000 for that fresh animal.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not biased. I just think it's a good option for some people.
Yep.
Kevin, Amy asks, what's your process for the calves when they hit the ground?
So the minute just before I came to do this, we had a calf born backwards. As soon as they're born, they get in-force, and then they also get tri-shield, and then they'll get fed colostrum, and then they'll get fed colostrum again in 12 hours, and then they'll go to the huts, and then away they go.
When you say they're fed colostrum, is that frozen colostrum you've already tested, or their own damn colostrum?
Their own dams colostrum, they'll get a gallon of that, and then we save the second milking. We sell that colostrum to Zimpro, and if there's enough colostrum there, we'll feed that second feeding, or we'll just mix up colostrum replacement powder to feed them the second one. In the second feeding, we feed 2 quarts.
Had a question come in asking if you would elaborate on your lime bedding for heifers. Is it recycled solids with lime added, dry it, or sand with lime?
So in 2015, we built the heifer shed and we used egg lime. And that was a disaster because it's too coarse and they cut up their feet and they had a lot of feet problems, which led to the corkscrewing. So then we switched to the cyclone lime. So cyclone lime is like dust. It'll blow away in the wind. It's really just a fine powder. And what it is, it's like from an asphalt plant that washes the bigger particles out. And so this is what's left over. It's just a fine powder is what they lay on. So it's not a lot of grit. And the benefit of it is then we just push all that into the pit and then it has a high effective neutralizing power. And so when you put it on the field, it improves your pH fairly quickly, but it doesn't last as long as it would liming with conventional egg lime. Does that answer the question?
I believe so.
Yeah, but then it begs the question: why do you not use that with the cows as well? If it's a fairly comfortable source, yeah, or is it too expensive?
For the cows, it cannot be reclaimed. So the cows are on sand, and then we have a sand separating lane, and all that sand gets reclaimed. And if I used it for the cows, I would have too high of pHs because it'd take too much lime, and I wouldn't have enough acres to spread it on to get the pH correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Marie's asking, how do you manage periods of heat stress? Any changes in nutrition?
For us, nutrition stays the same, but just water and fans and water and fans. I think the big thing, it's important when you put your feet up to pack it hard and make sure it's really packed hard so you reduce the yeast growth in it. Because in poorly packed corn silage, you get more yeast in hot weather, which means the feed gets hot, and so they're not going to eat it as well. So when we pack corn silage, we'll try to run 5 tractors on the pile, which seems a little silly, but as long as there's enough room for everybody to drive, we use as many tractors as we can. And that's worked well for us.
Okay, we've got a question from Amy. Do you have a hoof trimmer? Do you do your own trimming, or what's the biggest issue you fight currently with hoof health?
So we have Wayne Went from Plainview, Minnesota. His trimming companies Keep 'em Walking. And we trim every Tuesday morning and we trim on a schedule. It's in dairy comp. We pick out, cows every 3 times the lactation, they get trimmed. And not if they don't eat it, they get skipped, but it just comes up. So make sure they get checked 3 times the lactation. And then the biggest problem is probably, well, since we've been on trimming, there's really not much for problems. I guess you get an abscess here and there when hot weather, when they're standing more than you like them to.
Do you use a foot bath, and if so, how do you use it?
Foot baths are ran 3 times a week, and just copper sulfate and then a copper extender to help get any foot warts, just to keep them at bay is how we do it. But the biggest, when I showed those pictures, the heifer facilities, we've really transitioned. The heifers have gotten a lot better. We had so many corkscrews when we first moved into that heifer facility, putting heifers on lime and freestalls too early. And building a bedded pack barn and taking them to that facility at 9 months of age has really been a big improvement. And you're seeing that with higher peaks in heifers. If your heifers are full grown when they freshen, they're going to peak higher. And that's going to help with components, as well.
Jim asks, do you use an O2 barrier plastic or just 2 layers of plastic? And he follows up asking, what do you use for inoculant?
So on the silage, we use silo stop, and then that's that orange plastic, and then up north or white and black 6 mil plastic. And then for inoculant, we haven't really changed much. We've Meta Farms had an inoculant that we bought, and then De La Val bought that company, and then De La Val quit selling it. But then the local dealer, he was able to get another company to make the same formula. So it's Meta Farm or De La Val's inoculant that's been going for years and years, and it's always worked well for us. So we've stuck with it. One of the changes that we did is we used Vita Plus's Buchenrye on the barley silage, and we've seen a remarkable difference in spoilage in the barley pile, just that the top stayed a lot better with the Buchenrye. So that was a good change that we made last year.
Kevin, are you doing any grouping of that big herd? And if so, how are you grouping, or what is your pen sizes?
Basically 120 cow pens, and rations are all the same. Everybody gets the same. The fresh cows get a little different ration balance for dry, lower dry matter, but it's the same mix. And then we have one pen is first lactation animals, then there's a fresh pen, and then there's a slow group, and then there's a faster milking group, and then high or the older cows. So basically by milking speed, because we just have a AA powder, so to get them through 3 times a day, we need to group by milking speed to some extent.
Jim follows up asking, what feed additives, other than amino acids, yeast, biotin, or any other additives?
Nutritech from Diamond V. I've tried that. We used that last year for heat stress, and we've kind of stayed on it. The research says that it works, so I have to trust research. I think that's for going to college, and you have to trust research, even though you don't necessarily say, I can see it worked. Our cell count has dropped, and they maintained the same production last summer through the heat stress. So that's one product that's probably the only product that we use that is not real common.
Kevin, do you see that a slump of the components in your herd at all when you hit these hot periods now? Do you see a 1/10 or 2/10 drop in fat, or do you not see any change in components this month, for example?
Yeah, they do drop a little bit. I mean, it's just the hot weather. Everything, you only can do so much. So I think the key is to minimize the drop. They're going to drop, but if we can get them to come back as fast as we can, that's important. So plenty of water, misters, and fans.
Very good.
I think we have about 1 fan for every 5 cows in the barn is what we got for fans.
If anyone has a question, we've kind of dropped a few numbers if they want to unmute their mic and ask, or they can type it into the chat box. We'll give it a few seconds, and then we will kind of ask for final comments. Okay, I've got a question here. What is your breeding schedule? When is the first service for heifers? And do you do any synchronizing?
So for breeding on the cows, its voluntary waiting period is 55 days. And then the first service will be off activity. If they don't come into heat on activity, then we'll start off sync at 70 days. And on heifers, we have activity collars on them as well. And 14 months, 14 to 14 and a half months, they'll start breeding heifers. Our average age at first calving is 24 months right now.
Maria asked, what are your goals for forage RFQ?
I like to be at the haylage, anything 170, 180 is kind of what we're shooting for. For heifers, we harvest for cows, we harvest the first 3 cuttings of alfalfa, and then the 4th cutting, we'll let that go and cut it the 3rd week of August. So usually that'll be 8 7 to 8 weeks, and then that'll just go for heifers. So the heifers will get, pretty good hay. That's 24% protein, 23% protein.
Very good. We'll kind of do some take-home messages. We'll start with Mike. Great discussion. What are you saying for a take-home message?
Well, I think my take-home message is impressive because basically Kevin is doing all the things right, and it's interesting to see how well the cows will respond and in the program. And obviously, his components are amazingly high at this point; they're almost Jersey-like from that aspect there. So certainly that is really good. And I think the forage quality questions and his guidelines using the lower lignin alfalfa certainly ties in very nicely with rumen acetate and butyrate production. So he's checking all the boxes, sir. So he's get her done right.
Very good. I'm going to sneak a question into your final statement, Kevin. We've talked about what you've done. What have you got up your sleeve? What are you thinking will be the next step out there? You mentioned the boys coming home, but what's that next step?
I think just being open to opportunities, always willing to change and willing to try things, because if we don't try and look at the opportunities that are out there, we'll never know what we missed. So I think, and not being afraid to make mistakes, because we've made a lot of mistakes over the years, but always would be willing to try. And then also, taking care of your people, because they're the ones that take care of you. If they're not happy, you're not going to be happy. So always trying to, get better every day. That's when we wake up in the morning, it's how can we get better? And I think that kind of brings me back to a saying I thought when I was selling feed. In Africa, every morning a lion wakes up and he knows that he has to run faster than the slowest gazelle or he'll starve. And the gazelle also wakes up in the morning and he knows that he has to run faster than the fastest lion or he'll be eaten. But the moral of the story is it doesn't matter if you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. And so I think that's how we think. We always got to be moving and keep going every day.
I do believe that we have a quote from this particular webinar. That was a good one. Gentlemen, we sure thank you for sharing your expertise and being willing to answer some questions. We had a great discussion, and I think we can say that our very first webinar from the Four-State Dairy Nutrition Conference is a success. We'll look forward to having our listeners next month when we follow up with the conversation from Dr. Paul Fricke. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. And I will close out this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.